Hello, I'm here and Joe will be here in just a second. Allow viewers. So I've never really done this before. This is Lee Evans. I'm candidate for State Senate District 5 and I'm here to interview Joe, and I'm not sure about how to add him. Let me see if I can figure this out. Because I thought I already invited him. So give me just a second, I'm figuring this out. Nope. Crap. Okay, hold up. I'll figure this out eventually. Let me try something real quick. Rotate your device. You can't turn your device while live. Okay. Add viewers to be in your broadcast. Alright, I thought I already did this. It's not letting me type in a name. Alright, does anyone know how to add somebody else to the broadcast? I thought I knew how to do this. I'm seeing who's watching. Invite friends. I invited them. Okay, Joe, where are you, man? I put in the invite. I was just like a minute late because it started raining really hard and I had to go out there and roll up my windows. It says I've already put in an invite. If something's wrong with that, just come on here and let me know. Invite friends. It says Joe has already been invited. Joe? Where are you, man? We're looking for you. We got 4 viewers. Okay, we got 5. There's my dad. Hold on. Approve. Yes. Adding Joe. Are we adding Joe? Stupid camera don't want to stay where I want it to stay. I've got it up in the window. If it falls, then everybody knows what happened. Alright. Adding Mr. Joe. So I live out in the middle of nowhere. I hate to say that, you know, that's kind of a catchphrase. I don't feel like it's the middle of nowhere. It's Uniontown, Arkansas. It's a beautiful place, and I guess we're getting the rest of the hurricane runoff. But I've got some hard questions for Mr. Joe here. Isn't that what they do on the shows? They flap around the paper. Adding. I don't know why it's taking so long to add him. He's watching me. Let's see. No answer from live video guest. Okay. How many bars I got here? 2. Let's try it. Let's try it up here. 3 bars. I should be getting you, Joe. Approve. Yes. Bring Joe. Little technical difficulties here because I've literally never done this before. Approve. Bring Joe. Hopefully this will work so we can find out a little bit what Joe's got going on here. We love to know. It says adding, so I think the service is good enough. Hi, Joe. I know you're watching me. My phone says adding, so we'll figure this out some way or another. I mean, I've got 3 bars that should be good enough. Maybe not. Hey, Carrie. We got 6 viewers here. It says adding, so all I can do is wait. In the meantime, here's a little dance number. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So, how's the weather? No answer from live video guests. I know for a fact he's sitting there waiting on us. Well, trying to get on video-wise. Is it a problem on your side, Joe? Because, don't laugh at me. Mandy says clear, still clear, and Joe's in the middle of Little Rock, I guess. Let's try this again. Approve. Bring Joe on. Let's see what happens. We'll do it live. Everybody, oh, connecting. Oh my God! Joe!
There we go.
Can you hear me?
I can see you. Can you see me?
I can see you. Can you see me?
Hey!
Oh my God. Okay, so it's my first time doing this. I was starting to wonder if it would even work.
Well, there we go. We got it. We got it working. We got it. We got it going. I was trying to log in there for a second, and it told me I had to rotate my phone and do something else. And I'm sitting here. I'm like turning it upside down, and I'm trying to do it. So, let's see if we can get it up. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I hear you great.
Okay,
yeah, I hear you great. Well, let's start with a hard-hitting political question. How was your day?
My day was great. It was a Friday. I'm sorry, I have to grab a charger here. My phone just decided to, apparently, FaceTiming or going live takes up a lot of battery. So
I know, right?
But I had a great Friday. How about yourself?
Nothing much happened for me today. Been working on some political stuff, political connections, and making something happen. But hey, let's just get right into it. Are you ready?
Oh yeah, always.
All right, brother. And by the way, we just met for the first time just the other day. This guy's a monster. How tall are you, dude?
I'm 6'6".
Yeah, this guy's a monster. You better be playing basketball or something, right?
I was a runner. I actually did really well at cross country, and although I never ran track for my school, I used to run competitively a little bit, but that was about it.
Awesome.
I liked athletics, but I found more challenge in like books and stuff like that because that didn't come easy to me. So that's kind of where my life went. I always went for what challenged me more, and so that was definitely harder with me being dyslexic and all that stuff. And so that's what actually, before I got into politics, I was a teacher. So that's what caused me to go that way. So.
Wow. So you're dyslexic. Like, what does that mean exactly? I know people say it all the time, like, oh, you mix up your words, and I mix stuff up on purpose just for fun sometimes. What does that really mean?
So what dyslexia is actually a very broad category of learning disability. They estimate that about 1/4 of people overall are dyslexic. And
Oh, wow.
basically, it's a part of your brain that is overactive. And it usually presents itself more in males than in females. And
Weird.
my eyes can't keep up with what my brain is trying to pre-interpret.
Gotcha.
And so my brain's actually trying to overwork to interpret what I'm seeing on the page. And then my eyes get jumbled as a result because the signal kind of gets lost, and that's where the letters get mixed up, words get mixed up, things of that nature. But there's varying different degrees, and so I mean you can even be dyscalculic, which is dyslexia with numbers, and that's actually my mother and grandmother are both dyscalculic.
Oh,
So,
wow. What a word.
Yeah, I actually got dyslexia from both sides. So my mom's dyscalculic, and we're not sure if my dad's dyslexic, but it could very easily be the case.
Okay.
But I'm sure that we have some I took us off on a tangent there. I apologize. I'm sure that you have some
No.
have some great questions for me.
No, I wanted to kind of loosen you up, man. Just get you talking and make you
I'm
feel
loose.
good.
It's Friday afternoon. I got home, from work, got my nice casual t-shirt on here. I'm sitting on my couch talking politics with fellow libertarians. Man, this is the dream right here.
Man, I like that, and I agree. So, okay, I think I've got some questions for you. So, and I think I've asked you this before, but we'll ask it for the live audience here. What got you into libertarianism?
That's actually a wonderful question that I love. It's kind of a story, or I guess my path to libertarianism that I love talking about is because I was, like many Americans, I was at one point very disenchanted with our political system. And I was really looking for an answer. I was, what's the holistic answer? Because whenever I was first getting into college, I come from very political families, but like most people or most kids going into college, I kind of had my parents' beliefs. I didn't really know what I believed politically yet. And I had on one side of my family that are pretty hardcore Republicans, and then the other side were kind of old school conservative Democrats. So I've considered myself at the time going into college a Tea Party Republican. And so I really wasn't, I fell in that camp just because I didn't know about libertarianism. I didn't know that there was a budding third party out there that realistically fit my beliefs. So I mean, it was a natural thing. In the 2016 presidential election, I think about 2015, I really started to become a libertarian. Even though I had held those beliefs for a long time, I really started to affiliate libertarian. I really started to get involved in libertarian theory and philosophy and practical application. And I started looking at that. And then in the 2016 presidential election, I was a fan of Rand Paul. And as we all know, Rand Paul's pretty libertarian as far as it goes. He's about as libertarian as you can be and still be a Republican.
Yeah.
And so, and of course his dad being Ron Paul and everything, and they have those really strong liberty roots, even if he doesn't always vote like libertarians think he should. But after I saw the Republican Party kind of disenfranchise him with Trump and everything that went on in that really just crazy election, it pushed me to that final straw over to full-on libertarian. I mean, I considered myself that, but at that point, I guess it really woke me up and said that the solution really can't come from the two parties. It's just two big establishment system agendas, and you got to toe the party line and all that. And so it really just forced me that last little reservation step over. Even though I considered myself a libertarian, I was full on at that point. A Republican can't fix this, Democrats can't fix this. Too much policy in the way, too much red tape, bureaucracy, and party norms to go against. So it really, we need that third party, and that's when I really got involved. And I thought libertarianism, what made sense to me was it was so consistent. Democrats and Republican policy, which that's something we need to distinguish. A lot of times people think that we say something bad about Democrats and Republicans, we're talking bad about the people who vote Democrat or Republican, and that's not the case. At least for me, it's not. I think with most libertarians, it's not. My argument is with the policy and the politicians themselves, not necessarily who votes for them. Because that's, you're being sold. You're being sold on what you think is best, and just because somebody has a good sell and you're like, well, I think they could do a good job. I don't fault you for that. That's a personal decision. So whenever I say Democrats and Republicans, I'm really meaning their policy. And I think that's a distinction that needs to be made. But they're inconsistent as far as it goes. And libertarianism is so consistent because we start all of our policy, all of our philosophy, all of our everything starts at the natural rights of the individual, and which allows us to be consistent moving outward. We never violate the individual's rights, no matter what the subject. So that's really where we stem from, which allows us to be consistent. Which that, you're a hardcore libertarian like myself, obviously, running and doing all that, and so that's something that we realize from the inside, but people who don't know about libertarianism don't know that. But that was what kind of made me go, wow, this really is the solution. This really is it. They have an answer for everything. And it's because even if they don't have an answer, they do the critical thinking and they start at the natural rights and say, well, what would violate their rights? What's the answer that doesn't violate their rights and allows for the most freedom and liberty? And that's where the answer naturally goes, even if they didn't pre-know that. Well, so that's really my story of how I got into libertarianism.
I guess devil's advocate question, since Ron Paul got you into it, I get them mixed up. They're Republicans, so why not be a liberty-leaning Republican?
As I kind of touched on a little bit earlier, it's not the solution. We've seen how, we got Donald Trump because the Republican Party decided to disenfranchise Ron Paul. He potentially had the delegates, he had everything going, and they started making some really kind of back alley establishment rules, kind of like we get in Congress and we get in the Senate. Yeah. And so that's the way it happened. And the same rules that allowed them to basically disavow Ron Paul as being the potential nominee was what got them Trump. You know, and a lot of the
Good
establishment
point.
Republicans didn't like that, but that's what happened. You know, it came back to bite them. Which, not that I like the idea of Trump being president, but that was kind of almost justice, in my opinion, for them meddling to really take the voters' power away, take the delegate power away, and manipulate them like that. And so it kind of, they got their just desserts in a lot of ways, in my opinion. But
I
that's
agree.
why I don't think it can come from that, because it's the two parties have become, you know, realistically the same party, just the different sides of it. It's all about more government. It's all about whatever the issue is. We need to regulate, we need to tax, and we need to get involved in this thing that government has no business being involved in. So
I
that's
totally
really
agree.
what drove me away from the Republicans and into libertarianism, which really is where I should have been all along. And I just
Just didn't
made
know
it
it.
natural.
Well, I read, I looked you up a little bit beyond what I had before, and I found something where they were talking about taxes, so it brought me to this question. What taxes are necessary? You said some are necessary, so what taxes do you feel are necessary?
So I'm a true libertarian. I'm somewhere between, you know, a broad spectrum libertarian, practical libertarian, and a minarchist. So, and for those of you that don't know, that are listening, a minarchist is someone who believes in the minimal aspects of government. So I do believe that government has a role. It is a necessary evil in some respect, but I think the most liberty invigorating taxation system would be a fair tax system. So only a sales tax. And I think that has a constitutional root within it, because unlike the 19th Amendment, which allows them to tax income, which I think is actually unconstitutional, just the same way that alcohol prohibition is unconstitutional, even though it made it into the Constitution, doesn't necessarily mean that it is within the actual writings of the Constitution should have been there. And a
Very
lot of people kind of get confused with that. But I think that that is it being the name, the fair tax, is the most fair and equitable way to tax, because then we have just one tax. Realistically, I mean, technically it'd be broken up into 3 or 4 parts: federal, state, and local. And you know, depending on if you live in a municipality, you could have a county and a city, you know, sales tax, depending on how whatever your local government works. But I think that taxing sales and taxing it just on sales is a very equitable way. You don't actually tax someone's income or their personal property rights or anything else like that. You don't infringe upon that in any way. And it's actually, you know, we have to fund a military some way, and there's several ways out there to do that. But you're talking about, there is a little bit the idea that you do have protected commerce with being in America. Now, right now we're seeing a lot of right violations and stuff like that you could argue that sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean protected,
right.
but we have to fund it some way. And even though there's voluntary ways to do it, we have to start bridging and moving in that direction. So when I
I
say
agree.
we have a tax that's necessary, that's the practical libertarian in me saying that we have to walk it back some way, and a fair tax is one of the best ways to do that, both, you know, equal and equitably, so that whenever you're talking about tourist dollars going towards our taxes, instead of it being burdened upon solely our people, you're talking about people not being able to get out of the tax system because it's literally just what you consume. And that also puts it in a fair point. If you don't want to participate in the market and you don't want to consume products and you literally live just self-sustaining on your own property, then you owe nothing. You grow your food, all of it, you raise it, you do it. It makes it to where there's literally a way that you don't have to pay taxes. Now, that's not going to be most people, but you could get off the grid if you wanted to, which I think is freedom invigorating. So that's why I believe in a fair tax. I'll say that that is, you know, we have something like 40, 50 something taxes. And so it's like where it allows the government to play a real shell game of, well, we're
Yeah.
going to cut this one, but they don't realize that we're hiking this one up over here. And so it
What they do in
allows
Arkansas.
for yeah, it allows for a better conversation of, we have one tax rate, and so does it need to be higher or lower? And it makes it a lot easier for the average person to be involved as well, because it's more easily understood.
And I like that. I think I'd be on board with that. I completely agree. Um, so what do you feel is Arkansas's most pressing issue?
Honestly, not to give a too of a libertarian style answer and go straight for turn straight into the curve for what most people believe, that we're a one issue party in some ways, that it's all about marijuana legalization. But I think here in Arkansas we have a very unique opportunity from an economic standpoint, and that is that we are part of the marijuana belt. We're part of the natural area of the United States where marijuana naturally grows. And here in the natural state where we have a ton of farming, and we could really invigorate our agricultural system just by allowing industrial-based hemp and full-on cannabis, hemp and marijuana. And so we're denying our farmers a huge, huge revenue and prosperity, and really an invigoration of the Delta area, which has been sitting is just, I see gold when I look out at the Delta, and when I'm looking at maps, because I'm like, this is just such an underserved economic area that, it would benefit all areas of our state, but it literally grows through all of our state, not just in the Delta. So you're talking about the potential for our economic growth and creating a destination state, creating a, potentially a better taxation system, easing the tax burden, job growth, industry growth, population growth, GDP growth. Everything just from this one issue, not to mention all the other social justice issues that go along with it, or social liberty issues that go along with it. So that is a really pivotal issue here in Arkansas. Now, not every state I would say that, but for here in Arkansas, because it has so much ramifications for our economy and for our social liberty, I think that that is one of the biggest issues Arkansans are facing right now that could potentially help them. And along with just, everything else would be, for me, from a state-wise view, would be getting government out of the way financially in so many ways, so that we can, as my planks would say, we have to cut spending so that we can then balance the budget, and we can pay off the debt, and then we can cut taxes overall. So other than that system of going to the federal government and really kicking in high gear financially and getting us in more fiscally responsible position, I really do think that full-on industrial cannabis legalization would phenomenally grow Arkansas in all the right ways.
So how do you feel about our current situation with medical marijuana in Arkansas and really nothing happening and so much corruption? And can you speak on that a little bit?
So, as my I have a group of wonderful interns, and I think actually a couple of them are watching. I can't, when we're on dual screen, I can't see the comments, and I can't see exactly who's tuning in. So I'm going on blind faith here of whoever's out there in the audience.
Okay.
But they tell me one of my buzzwords is asinine. I like to use it a lot because I guess I should probably substitute a little bit more with absurd and ludicrous and things of
Oh,
that
that's
nature.
a great word.
But to steer into the curve on that one, or to use another one of my buzz phrases, to go down the rabbit hole, is it is absolutely asinine here in Arkansas, the fact of what we're going through with medical marijuana. The people have voted it in, and we're still dragging our feet. There's still this idea that, we can only have this many growers, and they really did get us on a legal issue with between issue 6 and issue 7. If you remember that controversy, we had issue 6, which was really kind of the more government-controlled, big pharma type of amendment, if you will, to allow it in. And then we had issue 7, which allowed for more personal growers, didn't really have to be as highly regulated at that stage. Still fairly regulated for those of you easing into the issue. Still very well regulated, but it was much more of a liberty side of it. I know that we use that word just a ton here in the party, but it was really more of a freedom, liberty side of it, consumer driven instead of producer driven side. And so whenever they did that, and it was totally legal to take it off the ballot the way they did, because there was an infringement. There was somebody who left a signing book out that just you have to watch the signatures. It's part of the deal. And they just
I
had
worked
that
on
at a
issue
gas
7.
station.
That was sad. I was really, really, really frustrated about that.
Yeah, that was a very frustrating thing for anybody that was paying attention. And then so we had a choice. Do we vote in this one that's not nearly as good as far as the way it's implemented, it has a lot of red tape and bureaucracy added to it, or do we just have nothing at all? And I think most people were like, well, at least we can get the ball rolling and get it started, so we'll vote issue 6 in. I
That was
begrudgingly voted issue 6 in myself, and I still voted yes on issue 7, even though it didn't matter. I still wanted to say that I voted for it, so I did. And it's very, very, very frustrating for anybody who deals with any type of chronic pain, and not just the liberty side of it, but when you talk about medical marijuana and just the medical side of that, and decreasing opioid abuse and decreasing people's pain and increasing their quality of life. There's a lot of people that suffer in this state from that. I know several. I have several that are very close and very personal to me that could use it. That, in fact, in my family, there's a vascular disorder on one side, and several people in my family, it really affects them, especially the women in my family, especially after they've had kids. And they deal with chronic and constant pain in their legs due to that issue. And
wow.
when you talk about something that could really alleviate that in a very easy way, and I see those people in pain, it makes me even more frustrated from a medical standpoint. And when you have the head of the Republican Party of Arkansas say the day after, basically, that we voted it in, that he hopes that federal prosecutors come down and start arresting doctors who want to write prescriptions. The head of the Republican Party of Arkansas said that. You can go look it up. It's on an AETN post-election analysis. It had one of my former professors who's endorsed me, Dr. Chris Hausnick, who's a wonderful person. It had our head of our party, Dr. Michael Packo, and it had the head of the Democrats, the Republicans, and a UCA professor as well. And
I didn't know
so
that was
I
said.
knew
Wow.
several of the people, and I've talked to both of them since, and it was just crazy that he said that. And he did, for God and everybody to see. But that would be my thing. It's just frustration. I think it's going to lead to us actually passing recreational here. And I don't know if we'll get full industrial, but we'll get recreational at least here in 2020, I believe. I think that's a easy bet, to be honest, because you have people who aren't necessarily for recreational, but are so fed up with the way that, I have a friend who, he's in his 80s, and he talked about how frustrated and upset he was about the fact that he voted medical in, and he didn't necessarily believe in recreational, but now he'll vote for recreational because he believes they've just absolutely screwed the system so bad on this. He said, if you're going to just disenfranchise the people like that, while I don't believe in it, I think you're doing a worse wrong, so I'm going to vote for recreational when it comes up.
And that's what they've done. They shot themselves in the foot, right?
Exactly. I don't think they realize that they're shooting themselves in the foot like that, but I'm kind of glad that I really wish that they weren't, for the sake of the people who could really use medical, but I am kind of glad that it's waking the people up at least to this is what happens. We voted. We voted, and we're still getting this from a predominantly Republican legislature. So that's very frustrating if you're an Arkansas citizen to have gone through all the legal rights and all the legal roads and jumped over the hoops, got it on the ballot twice, and got the lost it by 1% back in 2012, and then we passed it this time around, and now we're down the road 2 years later, and where are we? Are we any closer? Even though we voted on it, over 700 days ago. So what's the issue? And I think that's frustrating the people.
We're just so corrupt in the legislature that they had to get their grimy hands on it. That's what it is.
It's like the king. I get a piece of it. I get a piece of it all. It kind of reminds me of, in a very perverse way, the old tradition of prima nocta in the medieval days, where if you married someone, the king got to the king got to christen the wedding bed, and they had to pay that tax, which is totally perverse, but that's kind of how it feels. It's like, well, if you're going to do anything, we've got to christen this. It doesn't matter if it's yours or you're doing it consensually or whatever else. You have to get our blessing, and whatever we want to do to it after that is up to us. So
didn't know it was called that. You actually know the Latin term. That's pretty cool. This guy's smart. Vote for him. This guy's smart. That's cool.
I don't
Um,
know about all that. I'm passionate and obsessive about the things that I care about. So whenever I had
do
great
we need?
history teachers. Part of my degree was in history. Technically I'm a social scientist with a degree in education. So that would be
Oh,
I'm a social studies teacher by degree. I guess that's where I would fit best, even though I have a
sound
lot
pretty
of application
qualified
outside of that. Well,
because
thank you.
if we what's the saying about history? If you don't know it, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, we need more of that going on in Congress. What would you do on day one if elected? Any kind of legislation you might sponsor that you want to tell the audience about?
Day one, what I'm going to worry about is really getting acclimated and getting into Washington and letting the people know that I'm there for them and setting up more efficient ways for them to contact me and for me to get attention to issues out to them more easily. So, and that involves making relations as well. There's a couple of people in the House that I'd want to go see and just talk to about, that I would kind of feel more comfortable with. Even though they're Republicans that I believe are actually full on libertarians. They just didn't have a better route at the time
Right.
whenever they got in. And that's Thomas Massey, Justin Amash. Several of those are some Democrats out there that I would love to go and talk to as well. A couple of the representatives from Hawaii. There's a Democrat out in Oregon that I'd love to go and talk to. And so it really would be setting up shop, if you will, for us to shine a light on a lot of the corruption and everything else so that the people see this. Because I think that's one of the big issues right now is the people want to be involved so much because they see how wrong it is. They at least get that slimy, grimy feeling of they're like, I just know something's wrong here, but I don't know the answer. So by
Right.
shining a light and kind of letting them know, hey, look over here, this is one of the problems and this is what we're going to do to stop it, setting up that infrastructure to allow us to be very transparent and to give more transparency to the voters, that's really what would be important to me day one. And then looking at those relations to make in Congress to say, hey, I'm working with people both sides of the aisle, and this is what we're going to be doing. I will sponsor any bill like this, and kind of giving that day one setup, if you will. That's really what I would sponsor legislation that would be, even though it'd be further on than day one, I would already be thinking about initiating certain legislation and sponsoring legislation, all the things to do with my platform, which is, financial freedom and social liberty. So anything that would do that without the red tape, then that's
That's
what I would be
great.
sponsoring and initiating.
And have you ever heard the phrase "sunlight is the best disinfectant"? Heard that? So,
Yes.
going along with that train of thought, how could we reform the voting system in America so people have more faith that their vote actually counts?
Oh, that's a wonderful question that doesn't get asked enough. You said sunlight is the best disinfectant. At that moment, I envision taking the whole roof off the House of Representatives and let that light in. So
Nice.
that's how I feel about that from a metaphorical
All the
standpoint.
vampires
Uh, yeah,
just dying.
exactly. It burns. And that's probably that's kind of how it feels. The cobwebs are coming off. It's almost like one of those fantasy movies where like the spell is broken type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but in a more practical view, as you and I think have talked about this whenever we met a couple weeks ago, and it's what they're doing in Maine right now, or what they're trying to do at least, which is allow for a different type of voting system where you get to vote a preferred. So allowing you to vote for a first, a second, things like that instead of a winner take all type of deal. You
Great
have
choice.
a actual rated system, and it allows for, okay, so I like this person, but I like this person too, so I would be fine with them, but this person's my one, this person's my two, and it allows us to really get more of that. People feel like their vote matters because they not only did they get to vote, but they got to actually grade and put a value on where everyone stood, and it gets
Right.
us that issue base. And as well, in the Libertarian Party, something we've always had is none of the above. A lot of people don't realize that we have an option that, like when you and I came to convention and we got nominated, there was an option for our delegation in the state to disavow the idea of a candidate completely. If we don't convince them that we're going to be good enough to run, and our opponent or whoever else doesn't convince them to, the electorate, then we don't have a candidate that we run, because we're that principled in the Libertarian Party. At least we try to be. So that's an option I think the people should have. And if it's none of the above, I think there should be, repercussions onto that, because then it shows all the people that don't vote. That's a hot button issue. Even with some of my family members, I've been talking about that as soon as last night.
Really?
Some of them were like, "Hey, I want an amendment that people have to vote. We got to get people involved." And I'm like, "Well, I don't believe that another law forcing people to do something is the right way, but
Right.
give the people the option and actually a valid chance at a real opinion, not just an either or, red button, blue button type of thing, but give
Right.
them the grade system and none of the above." What if you get one person who, let's say they're a Democrat, and they get the Democrat, and then they get none of the above, Libertarian, Republican, so I would rather have none of these other two people in there. And so I think that giving the none of the above, allowing for the graded voting, basically. I know there's a word out there for it that I'm
Ranked choice or instant runoff voting.
Yeah, basically runoff voting, to where you do have that grade system. This is my 1, this is my 2. And I know there are other people who can articulate that better, but that system, for anybody out there listening and you would like to look that up, Maine has an initiative to do it right now, and it's very cool, very, not to use or to misuse a word, but very progressive towards voter.
It's a bad word. Don't say that.
Towards election transparency. That's I've always had a problem with that word in politics, because, okay, you're progressive, but what are you progressing to? We're all progressive in some way, because we're all trying to progress towards something. Or I guess some of us are trying to regress. If you're a Jeff Sessions Republican, you're trying to regress back into probably early 1800s or something like that.
Yeah, it seems like it, right?
It does, but the idea of progress, maybe use it that way, but the idea of progress for voter transparency, better voter participation, and all in all, better options and better possibilities for you to have a political opinion and you be involved. So I think that that's one of the things that I would definitely support, or even initiate legislation on, to make our elections better.
I like that. Some people don't even think their vote counts. Is there anything we can do to further assure them these votes are actually being counted? It's not some huge.
The thing is at the end of the day, there are people, like, again, I have a very diverse political family, so I get kind of all ends of the spectrum, and I grew up with that.
Great.
So maybe that's why I'm so political.
Uh-huh.
But I have a family member who doesn't vote, and is really, he's like, "I'm going to vote for you," but he's very vehement about not voting because he thinks his vote doesn't matter.
Good job on getting his
vote. At the
vote.
end of the day, it's kind of, in some ways, I see their points. I still see the value in it in a lot of ways, but because it's a numbers game. And it is. You count for one just like everybody else. But if we can get some things like a none of the above option, where if we'd have had that in the presidential election, the majority of states wouldn't have gone to Trump or Hillary.
Yep,
you're right. It would have been a rerun, basically.
Yep.
But I think, maybe something to where if you don't vote, it is a vote for none of the above. So even if you don't go in and vote,
that's a good idea.
So if you don't convince the population, then it doesn't matter anyway. You got to get people out to the polls to care. So if you didn't even convince someone enough to even go into a polling station and vote none of the above, it gets tallied as none of the above.
I like that. So I've never heard it put that way. I really like that.
I'm going to be honest with you. That just came to me right now. We saw the conception of that idea.
That's awesome.
Live.
The only hole I see in that's what about all the dead people? Like, they already suck at keeping up with that. And so they'd be like, "Hey, all these dead people didn't vote for you, so none of the above wins." It's the only hole I see in it.
We even have a death certificate, which basically to me is like a dead license. That's not. I'm using a bit of hyperbole here because it has a lot of better application other than that. But it's like you almost need a license to die around
Right.
here. And so the fact that we have to have a death certificate, we have to have these things, that should be we should be better about that. I'm for government actually. I'm for a mass reduction of government, but I'm for government actually fulfilling what it's supposed to fulfill properly.
Right.
So that would be something, keeping up with who died for election purposes and stuff like that. That is an integral part of government. Like if we want
Yeah.
to do
How
a
hard
good
is
job,
it? Uh-huh. They
like
should be
I
able to
just
do
don't.
that.
We should. And so I really, the more I'm thinking about it, I do like that idea of having it to where if they don't vote, that's a vote for none of the above.
I like it
So
too, and it would be worth the money put into it. I really like that. You want to talk a bit about your Republican opponent, French Hill? I got some questions about him.
yeah, for sure. From what I understand, it's really interesting. I'm 6'6", he's 6'4", so I don't know that he's ever debated anybody or ran against anybody that was taller than him. Not that that really matters. It's just kind of one of those things that voters talk about a lot,
No,
and
people think about this stuff. It's
they
real.
they do. It's kind of funny, but they do, and so that's just a funny little personal note. From what I
Uh-huh.
understand about him, and from everybody, I've never actually met him personally or Clark Tucker, and I've kind of intentionally been doing that to wait till the debates. Just something I wanted to do for different reasons, just for strategy and things of that nature.
Right.
But they're both nice guys. They're both very nice people.
Aren't all
In
these
their
politicians
personal lives.
nice guys?
I,
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot
you know,
except Trump, I guess.
we get so I don't like how politics has gotten so personal. I think it's really disrupted the quality of the political conversation and
I
the
agree.
objectiveness of philosophy in America.
You're right.
So their personal lives and who they are as people, their business. From what I know, they're both swell guys. They both are family men. They both are involved in their communities. They both are really trying and I think believe that their answer is the right answer. We just vehemently and massively disagree on policy as far as it goes in most cases. Now we agree on certain things, like French Hill and I agree on tax cuts. We just don't agree on spending cuts apparently, because I would have voted for a spending cut along with the tax cut that we got, so because that's fiscally responsible.
Right.
And Clark Tucker and I probably agree on several issues for social liberty, but he probably has more of a red tape version of them, whereas I have a full free-form anti-government version.
Right.
And he believes that healthcare is a right, and I know that that's an impossibility without medical slavery. So that it's just stuff like that where we disagree on policy. But as far as person, I've been very, very adamant about saying that because I do think that politics has gotten way too personal.
Yeah.
People have a right to live their life, and I think that's part of why a lot of us have gotten political, because the political and the legal have gotten into our personal. So I think that we need to represent that in our values and the way that we talk about other candidates, because at the end of the day, it's about, if we want to change people's minds, it's about respect, and it's about being able to have a conversation instead of an argument. So
I agree, and kind of going along with that, French Hill votes with Trump 96.6% of the time. You probably heard this. How often would you vote with Trump?
And I love the question, but there's a lot of people that ask that question, and it's a loaded question in my mind, because that would ascribe me to saying that I am either for or against Trump. And at the end of the day, I'm not. I'm for or against policy. I'm for or against philosophy. So whatever he decides to ascribe to would decide whether I agree with him or not, and if I would vote with him. There are some things that he says that he would do that I agree with, like he talks about touting legalization of cannabis. I'm for that. I would vote with that, depending on how much red tape they try to tack along to it, because sometimes the red tape can mitigate the good of the legislation.
True.
So that's something that I'm big about, and so really I think pardon the accusatory language, I think it's dumb for anyone to say I'm going to vote with this person all the time, or I'm going to vote with against this person all the time. As much as I dislike Chuck Schumer, I mean, the guy said something the other day about legalization of marijuana, and he said something else that I can't remember off the
I
top of my
remember
head.
that. I was really
That
surprised.
yeah, he was talking about something else, and he actually said something about we don't need to have our hand on the steering wheel, or something to that degree about another topic. And I was like, you know what? On a very base plane, we probably get lost in the details, but on a very base plane, I agree with that. So there's people both sides of the aisle that I agree with and disagree with different aspects of what they're. It really depends on the subject, I guess, is where I'm
Right.
headed with that. So that's
That's
my cop out, maybe whatever
no.
answer to how often would I would not ascribe myself to voting with a single person, even my closest allies in the House, or what they would be, or whoever in government. I'm totally about policy, and I'm totally about my constituents. So it's really what they want to do based on respecting other people's individual liberty. That would be my two criteria. Is it what my constituents want, and does it respect individual liberty? And that's my only two criteria for a vote. That's it.
Well, I like that. How would you how would you make it so you have a more open door to your voters than say other politicians would have? Gary Johnson had a thing called Open Door After Four when he was the governor in New Mexico. Would you do anything like that, or maybe something better to make sure the constituents had a direct line of contact to you so they could tell you what they want or believe or feel?
So I think a lot of it comes with, actually, this is where my young age is a benefit, because I understand a lot of things within social media marketing and within pathways, especially having been a young teacher. Because all we're talking about is, whenever you're a teacher, you take classes on how to be better representative to parents, how to be better communicators with both faculty and staff, administration, parents, and students. So you really have these four demographics all in one ball that you have to communicate with a lot.
Uh-huh.
And you have to let them know what's going on. So I would utilize a lot of things, a lot of social media, and I would probably go live a lot, and I would probably take a lot of videos of whatever I'm doing at that time, just so that my vote, if you want to have access to me, it is there at your fingertips. You can be as, I will allow myself as much, access to, or allow everyone as much access to me as possible, and allowing
I like that.
for, phone calls. And we can all do that. We can all do emails and phone calls and say we're going to be very receptive with that. But getting people involved in the real-time conversation of this is what's happening on the floor right now, I'm live, here we go, or whatever. Have somebody live in the balcony for me, and if they try to outlaw me on that, I'm going to scream freedom of speech. I'm going to scream corruption, and we're going to get a spotlight on that. And then we're really talking about people getting frustrated, I'm sure, because of the transparency
Huh?
issue.
Yep.
So that would be a lot of it, is just general, using tech to our advantage, and really getting people out there in the community, highlighting our media contacts, highlighting our different areas where issues are being really prevalent, and speaking on those a lot, and getting involved in those conversations, both having a staff that's pretty young like I have right now. I mean, I have several interns that aren't even 21 yet. And so,
Oh,
and then
wow.
they're killing it for me in different ways. And what I have them involved with, they really are. They're awesome. I have to tell them that about every other day, because they just impress me. And I think, not trying to switch subject, I think that alludes to how frustrated our young people are right now, because they're inheriting a system that they had no involvement in creating. And they
Frustrating.
want to be a part of the solution. And you talk about hard workers. These people don't know if they're going to have jobs out of college after debt, or they don't know how they're going to feed their young families, or they're going to do
Huh?
whatever. And they're like, I want to be a part of the solution. And they're willing to listen. They're willing to have conversations without arguments. They're willing to explore alternative solutions. So when you talk about people like that in my staff, and how we could branch out and really allow ourselves that accessibility through social media and through other technological means of communication, That's what I would be utilizing a lot to make sure that I was, because I want people to be more involved. I want to be a candidate that people want to be involved with. So how can I do that? Be as transparent as possible and allow them to see me as easily as possible, as often as possible.
And you're the only candidate, I'm sure, out of your race that would take that issue seriously. The Democrat or Republican, if they win, they're not going to be up there trying to stream everything or talk to their constituents near as much as Miss Swafford would here. Am I saying your last name right?
Swafford, yes, sir.
Okay, awesome.
I,
And that kind of leads me into something else. You know, we've been having all these Facebook hearings. I wasn't even going to ask this question, but it just made me think about it. We've been having all these Facebook hearings, people talking about we need to regulate a lot like YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff. And these are, very used platforms. Obviously, we're on Facebook right now. Alex Jones got kicked off. Some people scream censorship. It's kind of a complicated issue. Of course, they're a private company. They can do what they want. Could you speak a little bit about that and see and tell me, how do you feel about that? Do you have any feelings about it? Should it be regulated in any way? Is it censorship to kick off Alex Jones or anybody else?
we're kind of torn between two issues in that they are private companies. So they're still in the private sector, and I want them to stay that way. The moment they go public, as far as like publicly funded and publicly run and everything, I'm off so fast. I don't care the benefit, because you
Right.
talk about your information. I mean, they're already mining our information off of the social media sites, but you talk about so much more easy access, then that's what's going to happen. And so we want them to stay private, or at least I do, and I think a lot of people do. And that means that they have the ability to, create their rules and kick off who they want to kick off. But the great thing about that is that if people do get too frustrated, I think this is something that's not well seen a lot in economics, and that is that when something happens that a mass amount of people don't want to happen in a market or in any type of scenario, you have resistance to that, and then you have innovation. So people, let's say that Twitter starts really kicking people off. They're going to move to other social media sites. But
Right.
even more than that, there's going to be other smaller social media sites that eventually are going to pick up, because they're going to brand themselves on non-censorship. And so if Twitter does it too much, we're going to have that innovation over the next several years, and it's going to happen. It may be already starting to happen in its principle, or at the precipice of happening. Excuse me. So that's what we have to see in the market. Some people talk about net neutrality, and talking about that's a big issue with young people right now, and
It is.
that's an issue that actually they come at me first off and they say, "Are you going to allow these corporations to run up the price of internet and to do this?" And I go, "Yes, but let me tell you why. It's because it creates frustration in the marketplace, and we're going to deal with a higher price for a very small period of time." Because you talk about something as vital as internet access, they are going to have mass undercutting by innovation, by new entry into the market. And even though that is difficult, you talk about resistance and you talk about people having to pay a high enough price, then I mean, Elon Musk has already come out and said if that happens, then he's going to do his absolute best to create free internet for all through satellites, and he actually laid out a plan of
Wow.
how he could do it.
You gotta
So I
love
mean,
that guy, huh?
oh yeah, I do. I mean, and plus he named his company after one of my favorite thinkers of all time, Nikola Tesla,
Oh
and
yeah. We can talk about
that.
Tesla for a while if you want. I'm a big fan.
Oh, we could definitely talk about Tesla for a good minute. I love the story of how he was born in the lightning storm, and I don't know if you've heard this. I don't know if everybody at home has heard this, but the Nikola Tesla was born, or the midwife, whenever he was born, it was a bad lightning storm that was going around, just all around the area, and she said he's going to be a child of the storm, and his mom goes, no, a child of light. And he goes
Wow.
on to invent all these things. I mean, he was a storm, but he was a good storm in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah,
He didn't
absolutely.
always have the marketability of things, and if he had somebody that Edison really took from him in a lot of ways, even though there was agreed upon deals and stuff like that. He really was able to market it, but Tesla was really the brains, and if he had somebody that really had his back, that inventor of the light bulb, has over an asinine amount of, there I go using that word again. He has a ludicrous amount of patents that still, and if I'm not mistaken,